All right, favorite sixth graders, one more thing to teach you today. Last video, we kind of learned what's a ratio and how do we talk about them. There are two types of ratios I need you to know really, really well. You're going to hear me talk about these all of the time, and we're going to get those under control today. So just as a reminder, what you saw in the last one, when it comes to something like the snack mix, we learned in the last video different ways to represent a ratio. So remember, this was like 3 scoops of candy for every 5 scoops of granola. And we can represent that ratio as with a colon, 3 to 5. The ratio of candy to granola is 3 to 5, or 5 to 3, granola to candy. It's important too. We can also represent the ratio with the word 2. So we can say it's 3 to 5. The ratio of candy to granola is 3 to 5, or 5 to 3, depending on which one we're talking about first. You can also represent it as with a fraction bar. So the ratio is 3 to 5 or 5 to 3. We're not talking about it as a fraction. It's just another way you see them. I shouldn't say I don't use that one much. I do. And then last but not least, we kind of thought about the table. We got the candy and granola. We thought about making different amounts of batches of it. So if there's 3 scoops of candy for 5 scoops of granola, if we were to do another bowl or another set, that'd be 3 more of this and 5 more of this, 3 more of this and 5 more of this, 3 more of this and 5 more of this, and so on. So those are all the different ways we can represent a ratio. And today I want to get to the 2 types of ratios. Pretty simple concept, but it's going to come up a lot. Alrighty, so start with I do. Remember in I do, you just close that binder, just listen with me. It'll take time to write in a minute. So here's our snack mix guy, right? He makes snack mix out of 3 scoops, of candy and 5 scoops of granola. So what I need to get to today is 2 types of ratios. One's called a part-to-part ratio, and one's called the part-to-whole ratios, and there are 2 of those always. So the way this works, if you think about this guy making snack mix, part of the snack mix is candy. Part of the snack mix is granola. And then if you put the 2 parts together, you get sort of a whole thing that he makes, which is the mix, or the snack mix itself. So it's part candy, part granola, the whole thing together, we're going to call the snack mix. And sometimes we talk about both of those 2 ratios separately. So the part-to-part ratio in this situation is the ratio we make out of the 2 parts. It's the ratio of the candy to the granola. Those are the parts. So we make that ratio. The part-to-part ratio is 3 to 5. I don't know why my thing's making so many extra marks here. I'm so sorry. 3 to 5. That's a part-to-part ratio. The candy is a part of the mix. The granola is a part of the mix. And that's a part-to-part ratio. We can also reverse it and do the granola first and the candy second. If we do that, the part-to-part ratio is 5 scoops of granola for every 3 scoops of candy. That is a part-to-part ratio. We use the 2 parts. Sometimes we don't talk about just the parts. Sometimes we talk about the whole thing, which is the mix. So there are 2 part-to-whole ratios in this situation. We can use the ratio of 1 part, which is the candy, to the entire mix, the entire snack mix. And that ratio, think with me hard, this is slightly tricky, but not really, is there are 3 scoops of candy for every how many scoops of mix total? Notice I'm not talking about the granola anymore, the mix total. So there's 3 scoops of candy for every, if I put them together and make the whole mix, there are 8 scoops of snack mix together when I put the 3 and 5 together. So the part-to-whole ratio in this situation is 3 to 8. There are 3 scoops of candy for every 8 scoops of all of the mix together. The other 5 are granola. So that's another part-to-whole ratio. We can do another part-to-whole ratio with the granola, which is a part, to the mix, which is the whole part. That's a part to whole ratio. So again, there are 5 scoops of granola for every 8 scoops of the mix altogether. That number is not in the question. I have to do a little bit of work to find it. So that's a ratio of 5 to 8. These are part to part ratios. Candy's part, granola's part. These are part to whole ratios. Candy's part mixes whole. Granola's part mixes whole. 5 to 8 ratio. We do one more before we do the writing one. So the recipe for a batch of cookies requires a ratio of 2 cups of flour and 3 cups of chocolate chips. So that's a ratio, right? If I keep making cookies, one batch takes 2 cups of flour and 3 cups of chips. If I wanted to make another batch, it would take 2 more cups of flour and 3 more cups of chips. If I wanted to make another one, it would be 2 more and 3 more. And we're going to keep working in that way in the ratio, right? It's a relationship between 2 things that remains fixed. I can't back it up. I'll just scribble it out. So I want to talk about the ratio. That's a ratio, 2 to 3 ratio of flour to chocolate chips. The parts to part ratio in this problem, parts of the batter is flour. Parts of the batter is chocolate chips. And if I put them together, I've got a whole thing. I've got a whole combination of the two. We'll just call that the batter, the cookie batter. So we're going to make the cookie batter. The part to part ratio is the ratio of the 2 parts, the flour and the chocolate chips. Those are the 2 parts. So the part to part ratio is 2 cups of flour to 3 cups of chocolate chips. I'll call them CCs. That's the only part to part ratio. It's the 2 parts. You can reverse it and just say there's 3 cups of chocolate chips to 2 cups of flour. But that's the same thing. That's a part to part ratio because the flour is part of the mix and the chips are part of the mix. The part to whole ratios are going to involve this whole mix of batter with the flours and the chips together. So if I want to do, there's 2 of them. So if I want to do the part to whole ratio, that's flour to the entire batter. This is a part, and this is a whole after I combine and mix them into a whole thing. That's the whole. So that ratio would be 2 parts for every, got to put the whole together, the 2 and the 3 together to make 5 cups of batter. So for every 5 cups of batter, 2 of the cups are flour. The other one is for the chocolate chips, part to the whole, which is still the batter. And now when I talk about that, I say, okay, well, the part is 3. There's 3 cups of chocolate chips for every, got to put these together, make the whole. The batter is 5 cups. And so there are 3 cups of chocolate chips for every 5 cups of batter entirely. The other 2 are flour. So the part and the part end up making the whole. Those are parts to part ratios and parts to whole ratios. If you'll open your binder and find your notes for the day, I want to do one more example for you to write down. So the ratio of men to women, this is a true story. If I didn't say this in the last video, true story. Ratio of men to women science professors is 4 men for every 1 woman. A lot more male professors than female professors in science. Ladies out there, I hope you change that in the future, especially if you're great at science. So in this situation, if you'll make your first note here, I want to talk about what the parts in the whole are. Part, and then the whole is what I get if I combine the parts. This thing. I'm going to type it. I don't know why the stylus like drags everything like that. Drives me crazy. But in this situation, if you'll write with your pencil, there's 2 parts. And there's a whole that we need to talk about. I want to talk about what they are before we put any numbers to them. So in this situation, part of the people we're talking about are the men or the males. Part of the people that we're talking about are the women, females. And then when we put those together, we get a whole group of people we're talking about, which I guess is like all the professors together. So part of the people we're talking about are men. Part of the people we're talking about are women. And the whole is what we get when we put both of them together. We're talking about everybody, all the professors. So please, if you need to, pause here and make sure we get that in our notes. I need you to know what are the parts and what is the whole in any situation. This is going to be really important as we move forward. So in this situation, the part-to-part ratio is the ratio we get with the two parts. So the ratio of men to women, gosh, this is the worst, men to women is the part-to-part ratio is 4 for every 1, 4 men for every 1 woman. Or we can reverse it and we can do the ratio of women to men, and then it just switches to 1 for every 4. There's 1 woman for every 4 men, not enough. So that is a part-to-part ratio. We use the two parts. Men are part of the professors, women are part of the professors. The parts-to-whole ratios use one part and the whole. So we can do 2 of them. Make a note of that. There's going to be 2 because there's 2 different parts. So we can do the parts-to-whole ratio of men to all professors. That ratio of men to all professors is there are 4 men for every, how do we get the whole? We have to put the 2 parts together. So there's 4 men, there's 1 woman. So put those together and there's 5 in all. So for every 5 professors, there are 4 men. Or for every 4 men, there are 5 total professors. That is a part to whole ratio. This is a part and this is a whole. Okay. The other one is just uses the other part. We can also do the part of the people who are women, and we can do the part of the people who are, I'm sorry, not the other part, that'd be a part to part, or we can do the whole, which is all the professors together. So in that case, the part that is women, there are 1 woman for every, now I'm with the whole, 4 men, 1 woman is 5 altogether. There's 1 woman for every 5 professors, or 5 professors for every 1 woman. That is a part to whole ratio. Y'all, I hope this made lots of sense to you. It's just some vocabulary, but I do promise it's important. So if you caught yourself tuning out, not paying attention, just writing and not thinking, anything like that, I need you to pause and I need you to go back and I need you to listen again. I'm going to expect that you learned this today when you're in class tomorrow, and I'm not going to go over it again. So you judge for yourself. Did I actually learn and pay attention to this, or did I just kind of let the time go by? Please make sure you did a great job. After you did that, you're ready to do your You Do Alone and move on to the next slide.